This is Hashtag Gen Z, a podcast that explores Generation Z, who they are, how they are different from other generations, while also being an incredible blend of those who came before them. We explore what they think is cool, what moves them, and why they do what they do. I'm your host, Meghan Grace. In this episode, we're zooming in on a growing trend that's blending comfort with cultural transformation. That's right, Grannycore. It's not just about vintage cardigans or cozy aesthetics. It's about the resurgence of slower, tactile, and intergenerational hobbies like Mahjong, crocheting, baking, and journaling. We're exploring Eventbrite's recent trend data that tells a really compelling story. Searches for Mahjong events rose 365% between the years 2023 and 2024. Needlework and craft events increased by 41% in that same time frame. And baking events grew 38% in frequency and an uptick of 33% in attendance. These aren't just isolated shifts, though. What we're seeing is reflecting a broader cultural recalibration. As Gen Z is navigating peak digital fatigue, over 70% are reporting screen exhaustion. So they're turning to analog activities that require presence, creativity, and community. To unpack the why behind this data and this movement, we're joined by Roseli Ilano, head of community and a trends expert at Eventbrite. Roseli spent over a decade building community programs for entrepreneurs and artists and tracking the cultural undercurrents that drive how people gather and what they value. Her background spans customer advocacy, grassroots outreach, and impact storytelling, all rooted in one central question: how do we build meaningful, human-centered communities? So let's dive in.
Hey, we're the Payroll Baddies, and our mission is to make payroll fun and relatable.
And call out industry when we hear it.
You gotta call it out. You gotta call it like you see it. But we also gotta shine a light on all those unsung payroll heroes out there, making sure we get paid.
Yeah, those are the real payroll baddies out there, and we love sharing their stories and showing them love.
With gold chain and everything, baby.
By the way, SAP is the best payroll out there, and if you don't like it,
get out.
Today's topic is just so fun, and we're visited again by our friends from Eventbrite because they just keep doing really great research. But before we get into the research that they're doing and what they're finding, I want to welcome our new friend Roseli to the conversation. Welcome, Roseli.
Hey, Megan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And before we get into arguably one of the most fun topics that I might talk about this season, I want to know a little bit more about you. Can you tell me your story? You have a very cool job, I will say that. And I want to know how you got into that role and the journey that you took to getting there.
Yes, so I am head of community and a trends expert at Eventbrite, where I decode cultural movements by analyzing how, where, and why people gather. We're so much about the power of gathering, and my work really started with a curiosity about the gap between what trends were happening online and how that was translating IRL. So at Eventbrite, we're tracking emerging patterns in event data. And what we're seeing is that these patterns reveal deeper shifts in how communities gather, how they come together. And we really are interested in looking at what is this unique view, what's bringing people together, and using platform insights to help spot and make sense of these cultural trends shaping how we connect today.
Your job sounds that you were just like a cool person that knows trends and likes to connect with people. So alert, we're here with a cool girl. And I think that it's really awesome about what Eventbrite is doing. And this is not a plug. I think that so many people think of Eventbrite as like, I just have to go buy that ticket. But there's so much kind of like research that's being done behind the scenes, not in like a smarmy like data user way, but in the trends that y'all are putting out there and helping people understand how people are gathering. And that's been an interesting theme of this season. And I know we're going to talk about a very interesting way that people are gathering. And that is the Grannycore movement, which I'll be honest, I didn't really know about all that much until I was reading some of the work that Eventbrite has been doing on the topic. So let's just keep it really foundational. Roseli, what does Grannycore mean for those who might not? Because when I talked about this topic, I was like to my husband, I said, yeah, we're doing an episode on Grannycore. He's like, I don't really know what you mean by that. So for those who might not be familiar, what is Grannycore?
Well, Grannycore is Gen Z's embrace of traditionally older generation activities. So think Mahjong, knitting, baking, junk journaling. but reimagined for Gen Z social lives today.
I love a granny movement. I've really tried to do the mental math of how to become a grandmother without necessarily potentially having to raise a child, and the equations do not add up.
The math isn't mathing.
The math is not mathing, as the children would say. But when they were going the grand millennial trend, I felt very at home in that. I've just very felt like I've identified with Martha Stewart probably way too early in my life. So to see like Grannycore coming back into the zeitgeist is really fun. Have you tried any Grannycore hobbies yourself?
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up watching my mom and my grandma play Mahjong. And what we're seeing is Mahjong is trending on the rise. We saw searches up 365% on the Eventbrite platform from 2023 to 2024. And so I'd love to take a modern spin on that. So I live here in the Bay Area in Oakland, California. There's a really great spot called 13 Orphans in Oakland that is reimagining the Mahjong night to be cooler, hipper, and really seeing young people flock to these events.
That is, first of all, once again, you were cool before it was cool. Like you were doing Mahjong with your elder family members before it was cool. That's why you have your job, I think. But I think like Mahjong, like I started to notice it more just like out of left field. I was like, we're all playing that awesome game from Crazy Rich Asians, and I'm glad we are, but where did it come from? And now it's all making sense. So thank you to Eventbrite for helping me understand why some of these things are coming back into the fold. When did you all start to see that these kind of call back to, I don't want to say older, but kind of like of a different era hobbies coming back into the space? Because I know that you all track trends over time. And so when did you all like the light bulb go off for you as kind of a trends and culture group, thinking about when the data started to show you that? When was that occurring?
We were really seeing that trend emerge in 2023. And what it really is revealing is this digital fatigue hitting a tipping point. So what Grannycore offers, these traditional activities offer, are something that a generation who is raised online is hearkening back to, this profound satisfaction from creating with your hands, connecting face to face. And I wouldn't say that Gen Z and younger folks are rejecting technology entirely. They're finding a healthier balance. Through these activities, they're feeling grounded and they're in the physical world. And it's almost like stress relief as well when you're connecting with people IRL.
Yeah, and so it's not just that they're doing Grannycore activities at home. Some of them might be doing them at home, but there is a community element to it as well. Aren't you all is that correct that you're seeing that there's more intentional event gathering around the Grannycore activities?
Yes, absolutely. I love to use this word community anchor. And what we're seeing is these Grannycore activities are these anchors fostering real connection through shared learning, creativity, tradition, unlike digital communities, which offer a different kind of value. These IRL gatherings cultivate tangible relationships. They require participation. They require presence. I mentioned 13 Orphans, the Mahjong Den and Speakeasy in Oakland. So Jen Liu, who is the co-founder, she mentioned that she's just seeing new faces across generations. So I had mentioned previously that my mom played Mahjong, my grandma played Mahjong. I love the intergenerational aspect where Gen Z's flocking to it, but you can share in tradition and create deeper friendships, a deeper sense of belonging.
I think that there, as much as we're seeing Gen Z like move towards this, there is I think that you point out this intergenerational piece of it. Someone had to teach these people these hobbies, right? And so like Mahjong being kind of a little bit of your family tradition. My family's was backgammon, which is I think also a very grandmotherly game. And since that my grandma and mom taught me how to play it, my mom and my aunt still play. I taught my husband how to play. I sweep them under the rug every time. However, this is my call to the Nashville area where I live. If anyone wants to get together and play backgammon for our own Grannycore, please let me know, because that's where I would like to take this.
Yes, I love it. You're creating your own community anchor, Megan.
Correct. And if it was just about backgammon, I would do it. I love that old lady game, but I also just love old ladies. So, you talked about these community anchors, and I think that's so important. Every generation needs that community anchor, that feeling, that connection. That I don't think that changes if we're in a different generation. But what do you think about how these hobbies are telling us a little bit more about potentially the emotional or cultural values that young people are embracing around some of these activities?
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting around kind of the aesthetics of Grannycore versus a shift in culture and values. So, what I'm seeing here and what we're seeing with Eventbrite's platform data is that there's a real cultural shift in people wanting to gather. They're choosing this balance of, you know, slower, quieter activities where you're getting the tangible satisfaction of creating something real with your hands, with friends, with new friends. So baking bread, junk journaling, I mentioned crocheting and knitting. And again, what we saw too, needlework craft. Like when you see something like needlework craft increasing on the platform by 41% nationwide, what you're seeing is that as a value, people are consistently choosing to spend their evenings learning new skills. So I think that reflects a genuine change in behavior.
So I love the idea that there's this connection of intention, but not for productivity or productivity's sake. I think sometimes people feel like every hobby has to be, I don't know, like monetized. Like you can't just enjoy something, you can't just relax. And the idea, like some young people are learning these hobbies for just a skill to have a skill, I think is really interesting because that aligns with what we've seen in previous um, previous data around Gen Z and what they're interested in the workplace. Like we're talking about life outside the workplace, but Gen Z really cares about having like a really robust set of skills. And, maybe they're adding needlepoint or I don't know, basket weaving or one of these other really cool skills to their repertoire, but not for the idea that it needs to be a part of the hustle culture. And I think that what we're seeing is maybe you can tell me this is a bit of the way that Gen Z is reclaiming their time outside of work.
Yes, reclaiming time, this idea of doing something that's deeply satisfying. It can't be rushed, it can't be optimized. Again, this idea of presence, mindfulness that feels like a resistance to constant productivity pressure. Gen Z's choosing to balance these high energy experiences with slower, quieter events. Again, like this idea of tangible hands, doing handwork, crocheting, knitting, bread baking. I think there is something that feels very primal, back to the earth, right? Where it's you're not passively watching something on your screen, but you're participating and you're creating.
And I think that there's an element of like the deeper psyche that people like to use their skills and they like to be productive. And I think that there's a healthy approach to how Gen Z is going about this of it being productive, but it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a job or capitalism or making money. Like if they want to have this hobby of bread baking, they're not trying to potentially open the bakery. They just want to make bread with their friends or they want to go learn how to make bread. I know there's sourdough classes that keep popping up in my area, which I don't really want to bake the bread. I just want to eat the bread. So like, I just want to go, I want to go to the,
I was not one of those sourdough starters during COVID.
I'm a sourdough decliner. Like I just want to eat the bread. I don't need to make it. And I say that to all my friends that like, and I love baking, but making bread was just, it never called to me. So, I do think there's just something really nice that Gen Z is reminding themselves and other generations that it's okay to have a hobby that's just for enjoyment and just for rest. And layering in that element of community, because some of these hobbies that you talk about, they do feel very like, again, I'm picturing like a quaint grandma sitting at home knitting or someone making bread in their kitchen but potentially being by themselves. I think Gen Z is pushing us a little bit to say, well, let's take some of these what would be potentially solo activities and make them community oriented.
Exactly. And I think that there's a lot that employers, companies, educators can learn from the way that Gen Z is really leaning into Grannycore hobbies. One is they're honoring tradition while making it their own, right? So if you want authentic experiences, you can have an authentic experience in a format that feels relevant to your life. Again, going to a cool Mahjong den or doing a quiet night at home, right? Around a knitting circle. Again, this idea of creating a space with tactile engagement, intergenerational community building, that idea of a community anchor. Gen Z is also showing us that not every experience needs to be high tech or high energy to truly resonate with younger audiences.
Roseli, I love that you're already getting me to the place I want to go in a second about how we can, not we, but like companies and organizations and people that care about having Gen Z in their space might be able to use this in a not in a smarmy way, but in an advantage way. But before we get there, can we talk a little bit how you and the Eventbrite team differentiate between something that might be kind of like a flash in the pan aesthetic trend versus something that is really an indicator that there's a cultural shift in how people want to live? What would you use as y'all's framework to say, oh, this is just kind of the blip du jour versus this is really telling us something more about this group of people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we look at the analytics and we look at the trending data. So I had mentioned that statistic earlier about needlework crafts increasing by 41% on the platform nationwide. So we're seeing that consistency. To go deeper, diving into this example of a place like Nook. So this is a coffee and craft beer shop in Brooklyn. When we spoke to the owner, David, he shared that their knitting and crochet groups have grown from just a handful of participants to dozens of regulars. It's clear to him that the younger generations are seeking calm and creativity. So again, that melding of the two. And they're not just looking for moments that are Instagrammable, but a meaningful practice. So to your question around, when do we see that bloop du jour? When do we know that something is really trending? I mentioned that as a cultural beacon, we're really seeing everyone searches nationwide what is really trending. 2023 to 2024, we saw the growth of Mahjong. In events, 179%. In attendance, 172%. In searches, over 365% growth. Another one, again, needlework crafts. I mentioned that increase of 41% in the number of events that were hosted, but attendance was up 11%. And baking, again, we don't need to be the bakers, but we could be the eaters.
Yeah, you can't.
We're
eat that
allies
whole
there.
dozen. Yeah, you can't eat that whole dozen cookies yourself, or you can. I'm not going to tell people to live their life. However, we're available in your local area
Yes.
to help you eat those things.
Well, we're seeing that growth, and we saw it with a growth of 38% in the number of events hosted with baking and an increase in 33% with attendance. So when you see that trend growth and that steep incline, right, what we're seeing is that we're only going to be noticing more of these Grannycore events going into 2026, right?
Yeah. And I think that there's another element that millennials, just like we were really bad at having hobbies, especially millennial women, just like we grew up and we're like, you must just excel at things. Don't you dare do something for fun. And if you're doing it for fun, like, could you get into college for it? Right. And so I know that like part of
Can I
what
help
I've
your
been,
SAT score?
yeah, is it good on your college application? And then we got to adulthood and we're like, I guess we'll just work to death because we don't have any hobbies. Right. And I think that this is something that Gen Z is, they're trying on different hobbies. And I think that that's great. And showing that you don't have to be perfect at something or you don't have to be a professional at something to just enjoy it, to just have a nice time after work or on the weekends, or to reset and have that mental kind of decompression moment and have community around it. So I think that this is one where maybe the youth are shifting the culture in a way that's going to help all of us. As we, as we pointed out at the top of this episode, there's an intergenerational element to some of these things. And I think about the activities that you listed out, and some of the other ones that probably fall in this category are not just a young person's game, but allow opportunities for maybe family members, adult children, and their parents to go do things together in a meaningful way that's not just let's go out to dinner again, or let's go sit in a dark movie theater and not talk to each other. So I think that there's a really cool intergenerational moment that's kind of sneaking in there as well.
Yes, absolutely. And if you think about, this Gen Z generation, overloaded with their screens, they are, 73% of this generation reporting digital exhaustion. These Grannycore activities, tactile in-person experiences, are offering authentic connections that this generation craves. And like you said, us older millennials can learn from.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the funny joke that, everyone's like, if you're a millennial and you're in your 30s or 40s, like, someone that's gotten into marathons, DJing, or like wearing a weighted vest, right? Like it's somewhat, or my husband's, it's his is brewing beer, right? So like you get into one of these grooves. And I just think it's funny because I think we're late bloomers to hobbies that we're allowing ourselves to have that. So we're not lost yet, millennials. We're not lost yet. Okay, so you started to get into this space around there's some benefit to these creative, community anchored events that Grannycore is really encouraging Gen Z around. That I think that there's a lesson there for people that want to engage Gen Z, whether that is employers, companies, educators, creators. But what can those types of groups learn from this trend and how it can help potentially leverage some of some really positive things for the Gen Z in their organizations and spaces?
I think that's a great question. And for organizations, I think this means creating spaces that foster genuine connection. This idea of authenticity, again, tactile engagement, uh, community first and foremost. So when we look to Gen Z to teach us, I think that organizations, employers, they can lean into this insight.
Yeah, I think that there's something that's a benefit of employers that say we just want you to play, because I think it opens up a different part of your brain, right? When you're not just like focused on the to-do list. I think that there is that moment of clarity that occurs when you're just allowing your brain to create, and what that can do for the pause and the reset. But so much of what you've pointed out is these activities can build community. And when it comes to the workplace, we know that if we have a friend, like a work best friend or someone that we can connect with, we're more likely to stay at our job. Like that's just like every workplace study tells us that. It's one of my favorite things that we found in our research about people that work, right? That maybe there is, instead of just saying we're going to do the after work happy hour, everyone be there at 5, it's like, hey, at 4:30 we're all going to gather in the break room for we're going to have cookies and we're going to play Mahjong, or we're going to do just a creative activity. And it's not for points, it's not for a raise, it's not for a bonus, it's just to disconnect, and then disconnect from work and reconnect with one another. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for people trying to create stronger teams that might be lurking in there for them. All right, Roseli, it has been so fun to talk about this because we're just talking about people having a good time and finding community. And I love that that's your job, is that you get to study that. I'm a little bit jealous. And I know that you all have been really focused on how Gen Z is evolving culture and the way people gather. But before I let you go, I want to know just personally, what's your favorite thing about Gen Z, whether you're working with them or studying them? What's one of your favorite things about Gen Z?
I would say their intentionality. They're not just consuming experiences, they're creating them with incredible thoughtfulness about what actually nourishes them, what feeds them. They're expanding what in-person experiences can look like. They're teaching us meaningful community building. It's not just about choosing between old and new, but finding an authentic balance between digital and analog life. They're putting their authentic spin on it.
They are intentional. Sometimes people like to paint them as not so intentional, but I really do think that they weigh a lot of their decisions. And if anything, one of my favorite things that I've learned about Gen Z in this episode is that they're really good role models for creating a healthier approach and a healthier mindset to some stuff. And we can all look up to them, even if we are older than them, about how they're going about connection and resetting and really refocusing life, that it's not just about work and everything that we do.
100%.
Wonderful. Well, Roseli, it's been so fantastic to learn from you, learn with you, nerd out about some of our granny activities. If people want to stay up to date with the work that Eventbrite's doing and some of the work that you're doing in terms of fantastic insights around community and trends, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, follow us on Instagram, Eventbrite. And if you're an event organizer yourself, you want to get your community together. I love how Meghan, you said, hey, I want to be an anchor and start a backgammon club in Nashville. It's Eventbrite Organizers. And then what's really exciting is we just launched a new app. So just download our new app and you can find cool Grannycore activities to find in your city.
That's fantastic. I love it. If you're listening and you are wanting to anchor your community towards your cool hobby, an activity, or you want to explore one, this is a great place to do it. So head over to all the great resources that Eventbrite is putting out there for more intentional community. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes. But Roseli, thank you again for being here. This has just been a really bright spot on my day, and I'm excited to actually log off today and do something, just to reset the old brain.
Thanks, Meghan.
I don't know about you, but I don't know very many people that are hopeful about the world of work. And I'd like to change that. My name's Marcus Mossberger, and I started the Hope at Work podcast, where you'll find two things. Number one, really interesting guests. And number two, innovative ideas about the future of work. Check it out.
Another big thank you to Roseli for joining the conversation. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on some of the biggest takeaways from my time with Roseli. First, Gen Z is turning to Grannycore hobbies as a real response to digital fatigue. These tactile, slow-paced activities like Mahjong, knitting, and baking give them something they don't get from screen time: presence, relaxation, and connection. So if your calendar's been feeling a little too pixel heavy lately, maybe a crochet circle or a baking night is exactly what you need. Second, these hobbies aren't just staying at home. They're becoming community anchors. Gen Z is organizing Mahjong events at cafes, journaling meetups, and crafting circles that are bringing people together across generations. And it's a reminder that even solitary hobbies can be reimagined into shared experiences. And I think we all need a little bit more of this. Third, this trend is less about aesthetics and more about values. Gen Z is redefining productivity, because not every skill needs to be monetized. Sometimes learning to bake bread or crochet a scarf is simply about the joy of learning something new. So take that pressure off. Your hobby doesn't need to have a hustle attached to it. And finally, Roseli reminded us that if you're trying to engage Gen Z, whether you're an educator, an employer, an organizer, it's time to think beyond happy hour. Create spaces that prioritize creativity, rest, and real human connection. That might look like hosting a craft night, encouraging unplugged downtime, and just saying yes to curiosity without it needing to be useful. There's a lot we can take from this episode, regardless of age or generation. Slowing down, trying something analog, and not being afraid to gather people around something simple can be really impactful. Be sure to follow along with more great insights from Eventbrite. They've been sharing so much about redefining gathering and getting together. We'll be sure to share a link in the show notes so you can see also how you might be able to organize events in your local area, whether they're Grannycore or something else. As always, thank you for tuning in. If something in this episode stuck with you, we'd love to hear about it. You can share about it in Spotify in the listener comment section, or you can follow, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help more people find these conversations. And we're always looking for timely topics and insightful guests to feature. If you have a suggestion, share your thoughts using the form on my website, meghanmgrace.com/podcast. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Meghan M. Grace to keep the conversation going. And thank you to the Gen Z team behind the scenes who bring this episode to life. This episode was produced by Callie Waters and edited by Leah Kramer. Thank you again for stopping by. Let's continue this conversation, and we'll chat soon.